her, and she's really cute, but it's embarrassing, you know? So let's talk about the OSSTMM. I always get that wrong. I always say just one S or one M, but it's OSSTMM. Open source security testing, blah, 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 blah. You see, I can't even remember it fully myself, so it's not important. We'll talk about what you have to know about this methodology as well, about the methodology, how it works a little bit, how the analysis works, what the security metrics are. And this methodology works with trust analysis and a specific workflow that we're going to go over as well. Now, what we need to know is that OSSTMM is all about operational security, so that is very broad. We want to move our asset as far away from our threat as possible. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's say that I have a date, and excuse my bad drawing. We have a database table right here. And we want to get that as far away from the attacker's computer as possible, preferably in a completely closed off network so that the attacker right here doesn't even get a chance to perform his attacks if this is completely shut off. Now that is what we would call a complete neutralization of our threats. We can do that by shutting off our network, but of course sometimes we have a little web server running here as well, and we want that web server to be available to the outside network. So we're going to have to allow for, that is, why is it doing that? There we go. So of course we need to then create a little hole in here through which traffic can flow. Now, stop it, annoying mouse. Anyway, we need to create that hole, and we need to make sure that whatever comes through here is then also secure. We don't want to allow for any insecurities in here because, of course, then we are not neutralizing our threat efficiently. So in here, we will have to add some securities because our attacker is suddenly able to enter our internal network. We want to destroy this threat completely. OSSTMM is of the opinion that you can reach 100% coverage. That is in practice nearly impossible is what I found. 100% coverage is, as a QA engineer, I can honestly say this, impossible to reach. But they still believe it, and I agree with them in the sense that they say if you completely shut off this network, if you don't let anything on this network, then you shut off your threats and then you have security 100% coverage. Understandable, but to list all of the attack vectors and to account for all of them is very difficult in practice. Now, we want to minimize the contact between our asset and the outside world, our asset being our internal or servers, for example. But the thing is, sometimes we have to do that. Remember, we have to have that hole sometimes in there. And that entry point is increasing our porosity. Porosity, a little pore, you know, your skin has pores. That is what we're talking about. Little entryways that things can enter, and we have to secure those pores. We have to, if we have high porosity, we have to have high security as well, because more porosity equals less security. So we have to increase it. We have to make sure that we test everything. A pore can be of type visibility, access, or trust. Now, what do I mean by that? Again, back to our example, we have a little server running right here, and we have a little computer running right here. Now, that computer can either see our database, it might not be able to interact with it, so it has a visibility, it might not have access, no interaction, or it might be trusted completely for full interaction, no problems at all. Now, the asset can be accessed through those pores. So if we think about our network again, this is our pore. We increased our porosity because we had to allow access, either visibility, access, or trust. And we can include various controls to a porosity, to a pore. Now we have 10 controls specifically. These controls are authentication, indemnification, which is a contract enforced between the asset and the interacting parties. So if I have a database server right here and another server right here, there might be a contract between those. That's the indemnification. So you can either be authenticated, you can have a contract. Resilience is an important control. Subjugation and continuity. Subjugation is the assurance that the interactions can only occur according to a defined process. So you have full definition of which interactions can occur. That is full subjugation. All of these are interactive controls. We also have process controls. In this case, non-repudiation. So the attacker cannot deny its role in any interactive processes, meaning if I am a normal user, I cannot deny that I am a normal user in any way, shape, or form. Confidentiality, privacy, integrity, and alarm. So those are the controls, but we also have objectives. Are you guys still following? Because I know it's a little bit complex. Let's go back a little bit so we can repeat. Porosity is increased as we allow more access, and we can apply controls to our pores, either interactive or process controls, and we can have objectives as well. So these objectives are bound to a control. If we talk about the confidentiality objective, that is bound to the confidentiality, privacy, authentication, and resilience operational control. Integrity to integrity, non-repudiation and subjugation, and availability to continuity, indemnification, and alarm. Yes, I know it's complicated, but it's gonna get even more complicated, my friends, and I'm sorry for that. Don't worry, we're going to apply this as well. So you have your limitations as well. Limitations, if we take these operational securities and the categories that they are in, we can apply a limitation to each as well, being either exposure, a vulnerability, a weakness, and a concern. So if anything happens in the class B process, being non-repudiation, confidentiality, privacy, integrity, or alarm, we're talking about a concern limitation. A weakness happens when we have an authentication, identification, resilience, subjugation, or continuity, etc. Now, you might be wondering, do I need to know all of these things from the top of my head? Of course not. You don't have to remember any of this from the top of your head. That's why we have Google. Now, the thing is, applying this methodology is a different thing because you have to, for every contact point of an asset with an outside actor, so if we allow access to our internal network from the outside, for every pore, for every hole, we have to apply at max those 10 controls. We have to cover our 4 limitations, and that will bring our security up to 100%. This applies to a snapshot and needs to be re-evaluated regularly. What do I mean by that? Your company is your company now, but a month from now, a lot of changes might have happened, and then a re-evaluation might be required. So what do you have to do to get that coverage? There's basically 7 steps that we have to take. Now, this is the part where you do have to pay a bit of attention. We want to, first of all, define every asset that we have, the control and the limitation per asset. Then we want to define the areas around the asset, being our engagement zone. We want to define everything around our engagement zone as well. That will be our scope. So we have our asset right here. We have to determine the engagement zone. So this will be our control and limitation applied to our pore. That is step one. Then we have to define the areas around the asset being our engagement zone. Everything around the engagement zone being our scope. And then we have to define the interaction of the scope with the world, being the attack vector. So whatever can happen here, that is what we have to define as our attack vector. Oops, and jump back again there. And then we have to define the equipment required for that. So if I'm going to need burp suite, then I'm going to define that. And that is my channel. So I'm going to define what I need to perform my attack. Equipment being tools, of course. Then we can define our test type being physical, being either web pen test, network pen test, and we define the rules of our engagement based on this premise. So what they try to do is they define everything very well, and then they define tests by applying a threat model to this whole situation, to their whole scope. And by that you can derive your testings, your test types, and your rules of engagement. That's a lot of steps that you have to not remember, of course. This is all available. They go a lot into detail about what all of these steps mean in their own guide as well. So if we go to Google, you can easily search for this. We're talking about OSSTMM, and as you can see, I will paste this in the chat as well so everybody can read this. Let's see, course materials. By the way, sorry about this bird chirping in the background. There's a bird here. Lol. So this is the whole methodology that I was talking about. I tried to summarize it as best as possible, but please remember that these are a lot of things to remember. 209 pages that you have to look into. Of course, this is just the beginning. I'm giving you the 7 steps. So see, defining a security test, here you go. They talk about these 7 steps much more in detail as well. I'll paste this in the chat also. So we will paste this, and we will paste this. And then you can have a calculator as well to define your coverage, how much coverage you have, how much coverage you might still need. And you can do that with an easy calculator that you can find online. You can also find that in the course material of today. So let's say that I have 3 points of access. I have 1 trust and 5 visibility points, 5 pores that I can enter my application through. So 5 pores through visibility, 3 through access, and 1 through trust. Now I fill in how much of these pores I have covered. So authentication might be 9. Okay, now I don't have any missing here anymore. These I do have some missing. And where do I get this number 9 from? From here. These are your class A controls. And remember, that is that table that I showed you guys right here, class A interactive. And that is also what I'm doing right here, interactive. And it's getting 9 pores right here. Class B, I also have to cover all 9 pores in here. I didn't cover anything. And then I can see how much I have covered and how much I am still missing. I can also fill in my limitations. So if I have limitations, remember back to our table, exposure, vulnerability, weakness, or concern, I can fill that in and it can take that into account as well. And you can see a delta for the security, what that all means. Don't worry too much about the complete meaning of that. I just want to show you that it's available once you have that definition, you can look at how much coverage you have very easily, and you can pass this on to your client. You can say, if I work 200 hours, I will grab this amount of coverage. For all of these items, you can look exactly what coverage I have and what I'm missing. So that was a whole mouthful. That was the OSSTMM. Now I'll add these notes as well, these drawings, and I'll drop in that PowerPoint again with my pen drawings on it. And of course, this wouldn't be a true bootcamp of mine if there wasn't an assignment following it. So what I want you to do is I want you to define those functional security requirements according to OSSTMM. And you can use your slides to do that, of course, but you can also use the course material, these steps basically. That is what I'm talking about. So I'll put that in here again in the general chat. Ooh, what's that time again? So sometimes I cannot copy and paste this. I don't know why that happens. Okay, if it wants to play, then we're going to play. Let's paste it like this. And I'll paste in those 7 steps from the course material with it as well. And don't feel bad if you don't complete this fully. Just see how far you can get, and then we'll go over this as a class and see what you can come up with. So I'll see you guys in about 20 minutes, and then we'll have a quick look at what you guys have. And then we will move on to a break before we move on to actually talking about what OWASP is. I'm going to talk about it, and then I'm going to give you guys an assignment as well again. This is fun. You guys are working for me. Good job, my friends. Anyway, I'll see you in a bit in the team chat.